Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to the next part of the MTG Arena set review for War of the Spark. Today we're gonna tackle the first half of the green cards. So before we get started, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content, and please consider whitelisting YouTube on your adblock to help support us content creators. Thank you very much, and now on to the green cards. Okay, so first we have a Boreal Grazer. That card actually has some minor roleplayer implications for constructed. It's not quite Land of Elves, but it has some appealing upsides over it, especially with all the shock duels, heavy color requirements at times, being a better blocker, not dying to Chain Whirler, that sort of stuff. So yeah, could be an interesting card in like more defensive, mid-rangey green decks that can make this work and therefore kind of upgrade their Land of Elves to this potentially. The downside obviously is that Land of Elves are virtual card advantage by being a creature and a mana source, and this is just a low impact creature that doesn't actually add mana, so it's just only accelerating you, not virtually increasing the mana source count in your deck, so that's something to keep in mind. But it's definitely a potentially interesting card, even though only minor for constructed. And in limited, kind of similar. Like I think the card can be kind of nice in decks that have some problems with flyers potentially, could use the acceleration well enough, maybe a deck that like 18 lands, for example. And yeah, so not every deck will want this, but I can see it being quite decent in some decks. So at least give it a try, see how it plays. And then we have Alin, Voice of the Pack, one of the better uncommon planeswalkers, 6 mana, 7 loyalty. Interestingly enough here, unlike other 7 loyalty planeswalkers that we've seen, this is not the like 7-3 template. This is just like 7-2. So usually most planeswalkers are set up in a way that you can activate them twice without dying, and in case of Alin you can do that 3 times, which is part of why she's so much better. Sure, 6 is a lot, especially for an uncommon planeswalker, but the ability is quite good. Each creature you control that's a wolf or werewolf enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. There's not that much where that matters in limited, but there are some, for example her namesake, Pet, her wolf. But yeah, especially the tokens, so you basically get 3 tokens out of this over 3 turns, which is pretty nice, and she also protects herself decently that way. So yeah, quite a strong top end in green decks, but probably a bit too expensive and weak for her cost in constructed. Like 6 mana planeswalkers are like other bombs in constructed, and this one just isn't there for constructed. Next we have the namesake that I talked about, Alin's Wolf. It's a 3 mana 3/2 that can't be blocked by creatures with 2 power or less, which is actually quite nice because one of the weaknesses of 3 mana 3/2s usually is that they trade down with 2 drops. And yeah, Alin's Wolf usually doesn't do that, making it an above average 3 mana 3/2, I would say, for limited. Next we have Awakening of V2 Gauzy. This one's pretty sweet. First of all, it's an instant, so you can use it to surprise block and kind of 2-for-1 the opponent by eating their best attacker. It's a 5 mana instant, you put 9 +1/+1 counters on target land, and it becomes a target land you control, and it becomes a legendary 0/0 elemental creature with haste named V2 Gauzy, and it's still a land. So yeah, it's basically a turn 6 play. It's like a 6 mana 9/9 haste, which is pretty powerful, and like I said, the fact that it's an instant makes it particularly nice to ambush opposing attackers. So yeah, quite the powerhouse in limited. Might have some fringe playability in constructed somewhere, but for now probably not. But it is, I think, cost efficient enough and flexible enough that I could see this being sort of interesting and constructed, although probably not for now, maybe after a rotation or something. Next we have Band Together. Yeah, for 3 mana, up to 2 target creatures you control each deal damage equal to their power to another target creature. This is an incredibly powerful removal for green. Usually these type of effects cost 2, are not instant, and only use the power of one creature, making them much more conditional at what they can kill. Band Together is almost a 3 mana like green murder. Most of the time you should have 2 creatures that allow you to deal enough damage to kill whatever you need to kill. Then it's an instant, so it's very flexible. A lot of other removal in other colors has other conditions, so having this condition of needing like 2 creatures that are big enough together is not that big of a deal, I think, compared to like the conditionality of other removal in other colors usually. And yeah, it's just a really, really powerful removal. Probably the best green common in Limited. I was a bit surprised to see such a good removal in green, because that's usually one of green's bigger weaknesses, and this card is amazing. Next we have Bloom Hulk, another premium common in green, I would say. 4 mana 4/4s are already pretty good in Limited. In the past they were usually like double green and vanilla 4/4s. This is, for a common, much better. A single green makes it super easy to cast. Also, even splashable. You probably don't want to do that, like splashing random creatures, even good random creatures, is usually not where you want to be. But it makes it a lot easier, for example, if you're a green deck and splash something else, and stuff like that. And you get to proliferate when you play this, which is quite powerful if your deck is built accordingly. So this is a big step up from like your typical double green 4 mana 4/4 Baloth. So yeah, one of the powerful green cards and the backbone of proliferate decks in Limited. Not a constructed card, obviously. Then we have Bond of Flourishing. This card is solid, I would say. It has some minor constructed implications. It's a 2 mana card selection. You look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal a permanent card from among them, put it into your hand, and you gain 3 life. So you can make up a bit for how dirtly it is. Spending 2 mana on something that doesn't impact the board is nothing to sneeze at, but gaining 3 life in the process bolsters that a bit. And card selection is nice. In Constructed, this is also probably only like a minor role player thing. Could be like interesting to bolster your matchup against red a bit, while getting a card that is generally decent. It has some nice implications with Bolas Citadel, kind of like chains through your deck, because it gives you life back, so it effectively costs -1 life to play it with Bolas Citadel. Like it gives you 1 life when you play it with Citadel, which is pretty good. And then gives you other things to play. So yeah, and in Limited, I think this is possibly actually a bit better in Constructed than Limited. In Limited, your deck needs to be slow and defensive enough to make enough use out of this, because looking at the top 3 and only getting permanents is not that big of a deal, I think, in Limited, when you don't have that many super powerful cards. Even if you have bombs, they need to be permanent based, and you need to have a couple of them to have a realistic chance to like help get them too much. So yeah, seems like a fine filler playable, or a bit more than that in more defensive, grindy late game draft decks, but nothing too impressive, I would say. Then we have Centaur Nurturer. This is another like premium green common. Green has some really good commons in the set. Yeah, 4 mana 2/4, nothing impressive. By now the baseline for these kind of creatures is usually like 4 mana 2/5. But instead of the 5th toughness, we get mana ramp, color fixing, because it's mana of any color, and life gain. Gaining 3 life, arguably alone, is about as valuable almost as the extra point of toughness, and then getting the acceleration and the color fixing is great for splashing, for hitting your top end. Card is just really good, does a lot of things. Sure, ramping from 4 to like 6, for example, isn't as valuable as it is earlier, but if it comes with such a solid defensive body and defensive utility and also color fixing, that makes up for a whole lot here. Next we have Challenger Troll. Another pretty solid big green creature, 5 mana 6/5, is a pretty good rate, and then in addition each creature you control with power 4 or greater can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, making it that much easier to kind of just roll over smaller creatures that your opponent has multiples that usually keep you from attacking effectively due to gang blocks, and then that just kind of disappears Also, I mean 6/5 for 5 is a pretty good rate, so this is at least a very solid uncommon, maybe a bit more than just solid and pretty good. It's a bit hard to judge for me yet how valuable it's going to be in the end. I think it needs playing the format enough to get a better idea of how valuable it is, but I think it's never going to be a bad card. It's never a card you're going to be sad to have in your deck, and it might even be a card that you actively want when you can get it. Next we have Courage in Crisis. This card's a bit underwhelming. For green and 2, you put a +1 counter, +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then proliferate. So effectively it puts like 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature, and potentially also counters on other things that you want to put counters on. So it's not terrible, but it's highly situational and has to do quite a bunch to be worth the investment of 3 mana in a card. But I could see this being like an okay filler in like a blue-green proliferate heavy deck, for example, but not something that you just want to throw into your green deck usually, unless there's a lot of synergy, and then probably only like a one-off. Next we have Evolution Sage, 3 mana 3/2, that's already a very solid baseline as we have established, but this is so much more. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you proliferate. That's so powerful. Getting proliferate so easy and so cheap, and basically every turn is really, really powerful. Premium uncommon for like the proliferate heavy archetype, and overall never a bad card, always a very, very solid or good pick for any green deck really. Next we have Finale of Devastation. 2 green and X, search your library and or graveyard for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, and put it onto the battlefield. So yeah, this basically lets you reanimate stuff, tutor stuff, so that's kind of a nice flexibility here. It also isn't that cheap though, because it makes the creature cost 2 extra. And if you somehow manage to cast this with X10 or more, creatures you control get +X/+X and haste until end of turn. So this might have some interesting applications in like eternal formats, where you can somehow like hyper ramp into this, like some elf decks and stuff. Just kind of use it as a bit more expensive green sun zenith that also has the potential to just be used as a way to win the game. Therefore, like saving you the slot of, I don't know, behemoth and stuff. Not sure if that's gonna be with it, but it's at least something to keep in mind and to look into if there are like some eternal like modern or legacy decks that might be interested in this card. And standard, not sure if there's a place for it. Off the top of my head, I can't imagine a deck that would want it for now, but maybe there will be a new archetype, or there will be a deck like post-rotation where this is relevant. And in limited, I mean, I think it's not that great since the X10 is still unrealistic, and otherwise you're basically paying 2 extra for whatever you're getting, and if you're trying to get like bomb creatures, they're often not that cheap, so adding 2 mana to them might be so much that you can't even realistically reach it that easy. So yeah, don't pick this too highly. I think there's a bunch of premium commons and uncommons that are way better, but it's a solid playable at the very least in limited, I think. Next we have Forced Landing, basically Plummet that just puts the creature on the bottom of its owner's library. So yeah, it's about as good as Plummet. It just functions slightly differently. Solid sideboard card, probably nothing you want in your main deck usually. If your deck is very weak to flyers and you're playing best of 1, I could see that you might want one of these. Then we have Giant Growth. Not much to say here. For constructed, Giant Growth sometimes matters. Off the top of my head, there's not really a deck that wants it. But for limited, this is a great trick. So your green deck is usually going to be happy to play one of these always, and even multiples in most cases. Next we have the Green God Eternal, Ronas, 5 mana 5/5 Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield you double the power of each other creature you control, and those creatures gain Vigilance until end of turn. Also much weaker than the White God Eternal, probably on a similar power level or even slightly stronger than the Red and the Black Eternal, I would argue. maybe on a similar power level as the blue one in a way. I still can't believe how much better the white one is than the other ones, at least in limited. But yeah, I mean, 5 mana, 5/5 Death Touch that just kind of lets you do a nice alpha strike is pretty powerful. So still a pretty high pick in a limited for sure. And the card also has constructed implications because it can just end the game real quick. Like if you drop this on turn 4, turn 5, like turn 5 or turn 4 with Land of Elves, this can already be enough to kind of kill the opponent. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this pop up in Standard sooner or later. Next we have Jiang Yanggu, Wildcrafter, another 3 mana planeswalker. This time we have the 3 loyalty -1 template. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has add 1 mana of any color, so it gives you nice color fixing and acceleration, and obviously his minus lets you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature to make sure you can actually use the static ability. So yeah, also has nice synergy with his pet, the 4 mana Fox. Gets double counters, which will be discussed in the second half of the green cards. But yeah, pretty solid planeswalker, I think. Kind of lets you do some explosive stuff, makes your creatures line up better against opposing ones. So at least a pretty good uncommon. Not sure how premium he is gonna end up being, if he's just solid or really good, but definitely a card that I'm yeah, confident picking and playing in most green decks. Also keep in mind it has particularly nice synergy with all the proliferate in green and other colors, so especially in something like green-blue, seems like a great proliferate enabler. We could actually have some constructed implications even to do some explosive stuff, if there's, but probably only in like decks, not in existing ones. Next we have Crawl Stinger, so 3 mana 2/2 Death Touch, your typical Basilisk, just different creature type and name. So yeah, a serviceable 3-drop in limited, basically. That's about it. And last but not least for the first half we have Wrangler. That's a pretty nice card actually. It's a 2 mana 2/1 trample, and whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Wrangler. As we've seen, there's like a 4 mana 4/4 in common, for example, stuff like that. So if you have a couple of ways to trigger, this quickly becomes a premium 2-drop. Otherwise it's an okay 2-drop, 1 toughness. If you don't get it to 2 toughness quickly, can be quite the downside. Trample is like a minor utility here, but this card actually has some interesting applications in constructed potentially. There are a bunch of good 3-drops that trigger this, like Spellbreaker, Steel Leaf Champion, then like all the 4-drops you usually want to play do it, and so on, like Galta, yada yada. So this is kind of comparable to a Pelt Collector, just as +1 power and trample and costs a mana more and is a bit more conditional. It's obviously not as good as Pelt Collector. Pelt Collector is a rare, but this is not that much worse in the right decks. So I can totally see messing around with this in constructed in shells built for it, and it could snowball pretty nicely. Alright, that's the first half of the green cards. Let me know what you think about the cards and my assessment, and of the series and so on. And yeah, if you enjoy the content, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content. Like, tell your friends, leave a comment, and yeah, hope to see you in the second part tomorrow. Thanks for watching everyone, I'm your host ManuS. Bye!